Protests on campuses continue across North America. In Toronto, pro-Palestinian demonstrators have been occupying a section of campus at the University of Toronto for a sixth day. They are demanding the school divest from companies involved in the Israel-Hamas war. Tyler Cheese has more on that.
Last year, we held an 18-day occupation of a building at Victoria College, which is part of the University of Toronto, demanding that they join the broader university and divest from fossil fuels.
The University of Toronto officially divested from its fossil fuel holdings in 2021, but last year students organized against 3 independent colleges that were still holding out.
We were ultimately successful, which was really exciting.
Erin Mackey is one of the organizers of the current student encampment to protest the university's ties to Israel. She says last year's win is giving her hope for another.
It is totally possible. They have an ethical investments policy, and really all we're asking is for them to adhere to it.
The students' current demands include divestment from any assets that contribute to the state of Israel.
Universities are notoriously secretive about what companies they're actually investing in.
Experts say most universities take a non-political stance on investments, but there is precedent for student activism to make a difference. Specifically, the student divestment campaigns against South African apartheid in the 1980s.
It is largely credited with being a major political factor in creating the political conditions for the Canadian government to impose real meaningful economic sanctions against South Africa.
He believes the current movement could have a similar effect in changing views on the conflict in the Middle East. But as the occupation continues, some on campus say they're feeling uneasy.
I would like to see all of the really hostile slogans on the posters being taken down.
Robert Schwartz is a Jewish professor who teaches at the university. He says he's spoken with other Jewish faculty members who say they also feel unsafe.
I feel somewhat threatened. I'm very concerned with some of the slogans that are on the signs and some of the chants that are being used, and it really feels quite threatening.
Still, he's hoping for a peaceful resolution between the administration and protesters. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, we want to continue that conversation about campus protests happening across North America. In Toronto, pro-Palestinian demonstrators have been occupying a section of campus at the University of Toronto now for day 6. For more on how Jewish students and faculty are feeling, we're joined now by Pekka Sinervo. He is a physics professor at the University of Toronto and the school's former Dean of Arts and Sciences, and we've reached him in Toronto. It's good to speak with you, Professor.
Well, good to see you, Sarah.
We just heard in an item that we aired a story from a professor who says that he's feeling fear, feels some level of threat because of the pro-Palestinian encampments at the U of T. How are you feeling? I'm
feeling similarly. The protest at the campus, the encampment, is actually just one example of many that have actually created quite a toxic environment on campus over the last 6 months.
Jewish students and faculty have been raising alarms about what they're calling concerning language being used on signs and in chanting that's being done by protesters. We saw some pictures and we see signs in those stories of posters that say divest now. But what are some of the things that you have seen that have sparked concerns?
Well, there are targets around characterizing Jews as being assassins. There are signs which actually the blanket all the Zionists as being completely the bad actors. It is very clearly targeted against Jews, and there is no way of avoiding that.
Can you talk to me about instances of antisemitism that you've seen on campus? I understand from the notes I have here that both yourself and students and faculty have experienced some of this. Can you talk to me about that?
Sure. We've been quite concerned about what's happening, what the Jewish student experience has been. We, in particular, one of our primary concerns has been what's happening in the classroom. We have, unfortunately, colleagues who will come in and say, make statements that are just cannot be interpreted in any other way than being anti-Semitic. Certainly anti-Israel and anti-Zionist, but placing Jewish students in a situation where they have absolutely no ability to actually be there with their own identities, to the extent where they don't believe they're safe in the classroom. That's one type of example. The other is where faculty within departments have been put under so much pressure to either stop collaborating with the colleagues at Israeli universities or stop participating in research activities which take place in the Middle East, such that they're preparing to actually leave their departments.
The University of Toronto.
Let me ask you, what's the path through? I understand you have tried to create a space for dialogue, discussion about what's happening on campus in terms of anti-Semitism and protest, but that those efforts, they weren't allowed to proceed because there were safety concerns?
That's right. We had one event where we were having a panel of 2 Jewish faculty, myself and our director of Jewish studies, and 2 Muslim scholars. Us 4 colleagues, we were going to be talking about how students were experiencing both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on campus. When the panel was announced, the firing on social media started to the point where the staff who were organizing the event started being specifically targeted. So out of abundance of caution, out of concern about people's safety, the panel was canceled.
Pro-Palestinian protesters, they cite their right to free speech and open dialogue. And to your point that your discussion had to be canceled, that is unfortunate, because open dialogue on a campus seems to be sort of at the core of what it's supposed to be all about. But their argument is that their encampments should be able to remain because they're just exercising freedom of speech. I know you can understand that argument. What do you make of it, given how it's playing out?
Freedom of expression is something that we value. But a dialogue is not when one person is shouting to the other. What dialogue is one where we can actually sit down and listen to each other, actually try to get an understanding or a better understanding of where each of us are coming from with our own histories and backgrounds. It's not a dialogue when you have protests which are not interested in hearing the other side or attempting to be informed. Unfortunately, that's what the encampment is all about right now. It simply doesn't allow for any space for the sort of dialogue a university is supposed to be all about.
I appreciate your take on this. That's Pekka Sinervo, a physics professor at the University of Toronto, the former Dean of Arts and Sciences. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.